Good morning. This past year and a half have been difficult for all of us. Across the country, families have lost loved ones before their time. Hardworking Canadians have lost their jobs and have seen the cost of living skyrocket. We're finally at a point, thanks to the efforts of all Canadians who've stayed at home, got tested, got vaccinated, where we can see our loved ones, our friends, and our families again. We shouldn't be risking that for political games or political gain. La dernière année a été difficile pour tout le monde. Partout au pays, des familles ont perdu des proches, des travailleurs ont perdu leur emploi et les prix continuent d'augmenter. Les Canadiens ont fait de nombreux efforts. Pendant la pandémie, vous êtes restés à la maison, vous vous êtes fait tester et vous avez reçu le vaccin. Cela a porté ses fruits, car on peut maintenant revoir nos proches, nos amis et nos familles. Mais il ne faut pas mettre en péril tous nos efforts pour des jeux ou des gains politiques. A leader who cared about the best interests of Canadians would be straining every sinew to secure the recovery right now. Instead, Justin Trudeau has called an election. That's Justin Trudeau's choice. And I hope that his decision doesn't cost Canadians too dearly. My wife, Rebecca, and I had COVID-19. We know the fears and uncertainties that are out there. But let's be clear. This election is not about the next week, the next month, or even the next year. It's about the next 4 years. It's about who will deliver the economic recovery Canada needs. It's about who will take action to protect Canadians from spiraling living costs, from rising taxes, from poorer services. For the past 6 years, we've been promised solutions, and year after year after year, Justin Trudeau has let the Canadian people down. The result? Hard-pressed families struggling to pay bills and worried about the cost of food, of housing, of heating. And the Liberal Party's answer? To ask you to reward them with another 4 years of majority government for doing the bare minimum. Another 4 years of broken promises and of letting Canadians down. And the NDP, Greens, and Bloc Québécois, they support spending other people's money as much as the Liberals. They're all the same. Depuis 6 ans, on nous promet des solutions. Et année après année, Justin Trudeau laisse tomber les Canadiens. Le résultat, des familles stressées qui ont de la difficulté à payer leurs factures. Des gens qui s'inquiètent du prix des aliments, du logement et du chauffage. La réponse du Parti libéral, il vous demande de la récompenser avec 4 autres années. 4 autres années à faire de fausses promesses, à faire le minimum et à laisser tomber les Canadiens. Et le Bloc, l'NPD et les Verts, comme les libéraux, ils veulent dépenser votre argent. Ils sont tous pareils. Business as usual isn't enough. Canadians need more. Canada needs more. We need a strong economy to support high wages for workers and great infrastructure. We need a strong economy so that today's Canadians can have confidence that tomorrow will be brighter for the next generation. Canadians deserve to know what their politicians will deliver. They deserve to know that there's a plan, and they deserve a government that will keep its word. 12 years in the military have taught me to always have a plan. Canada's recovery plan will unite our country and secure the future. I am a new Conservative leader with a proven track record and a fresh approach. It's Canada's recovery plan to get our economy firing on all cylinders and to get our public finances under control. It's our plan to secure 1 million jobs, tough new anti-corruption laws, mental health action, securing Canadian-made medical supplies, balancing the budget. Les 12 ans que j'ai passés dans les forces armées canadiennes m'ont appris qu'il faut toujours avoir un plan. C'est ce qu'on va faire avec le plan de rétablissement du Canada. Le plan de rétablissement va nous aider à relancer notre économie et à bien gérer nos finances publiques. C'est notre plan pour agir. 1 million d'emplois, une nouvelle loi anticorruption sévère, de l'action en santé mentale, des fournitures médicales fabriquées au Canada, un budget équilibré et des solutions à la pénurie de main-d'œuvre. The alternative is Justin Trudeau's entitled government, borrowing $424 million a day, racking up $1.4 trillion of debt that he's going to ask you and your children to pay back. We can't afford more of the same. We can't afford more borrowing and higher costs of living while Justin hands out contracts to his friends. Conservatives will stand up for hard-working Canadians and their families. We'll work for you, not a small group of people in Ottawa who help themselves, lobbyists, donors, and friends of the Liberal Party. We'll work relentlessly to make sure that for generations to come, Canadians can grow up with world-class services, a healthy economy, and healthy finances. Canada is a country where politicians must earn trust, not one where you're born into power and can take it for granted. Our team is ready to get to work, to earn your vote, and then deliver that plan. The election is about the future, and the choice is this. Who do you trust to secure your economic future? There are 5 parties, but 2 choices. Canada's Conservatives or more of the same. Vote for a strong economy. Vote for Canada's recovery plan. Vote to secure the future. Vote Conservative. À qui faites-vous confiance pour agir pour votre avenir économique? Il y a 5 partis, mais 2 choix. Les conservateurs d'un côté, ou plus de scandales, plus de dépenses et plus de dettes de l'autre. Votez pour une économie forte. Votez pour le plan de rétablissement du Canada. Votez pour l'avenir. Votez conservateur. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
We will now be taking questions. Nous allons prendre les questions maintenant. Just a quick reminder, it is 1 question, 1 follow-up. Juste un petit rappel, c'est une question et un suivi. Merci. First question.
Andrew Lawton, True North. You've been very vocal in pushing for transparency with regard to the National Microbiology Lab security leak. We've heard stories of Chinese infiltration of Canadian institutions, of influence campaigns against politicians. How big a threat do you think Chinese regime infiltration is, and if elected, what would you do to counter that?
Justin Trudeau has been offside with respect to Communist China for 6 years. And our citizens, the 2 Michaels, are approaching 1,000 days in prison. It's been the Conservative Party that's been standing up, like Canadian governments of the past, for human rights, for our dignity, whether our motion with respect to the Uyghur minority population and the genocide, with respect to banning Huawei from our critical 5G infrastructure. Mr. Trudeau is completely offside with our values as a country and our allies. And the risks to our economy, to our public safety, are real. So Canadians need to know a Conservative government will never sacrifice your security, the well-being of our country, and our values at home and abroad.
In September, you pledged to balance the budget within 10 years. More recently, we've heard projections from the Parliamentary Budget Officer that we could be running deficits until 2070, for 50 years. Do you think that balancing in 10 years is still feasible? And if so, what would that course correction from an O'Toole government look like?
It looks like Canada's recovery plan, our 5-point plan to secure the future. We will get the budget back to balance over the course of the next decade, our 5th pillar, because our 1st pillar is going to get people working in all sectors of the economy and in all regions of the country. We're the only party that supports people getting back to work in the energy, the softwood lumber, steel, aluminum, our fabricators. We value small businesses and we'll have very detailed programs to help those in hospitality, tourism, hanging on by a thread. We will have the economy surging in the right direction for all Canadians, and that will allow us to balance the budget over the course of the next decade by helping people get back to work in all parts of this country.
Prochaine question.
Simon Lefranc pour Le Droit. Bonjour, Monsieur O'Toole. Quelle est la position du Parti conservateur sur la vaccination obligatoire des fonctionnaires fédéraux?
Merci pour la question. Les vaccins sont très importants. Les vaccins sont efficaces et sécuritaires et j'encourage tous les Canadiens, tous les Québécois de se faire vacciner. Mon épouse Rebecca et moi, on a eu la COVID-19 et c'est pourquoi on a publié nos vaccinations. C'est un outil très important pour une relance économique et pour lutter contre la quatrième vague. Je soutiens des mesures renforcées, telles le port du masque, de pouvoir montrer un test de dépistage négatif de la COVID-19 et des tests de dépistage rapides pour les personnes qui n'ont pas encore été vaccinées. Ce sont des précautions raisonnables à prendre. Justin Trudeau a encore une fois laissé tomber le Canada. Son élection de la quatrième vague est un autre exemple qu'il a échoué. Vaccines are safe and secure for use. They're a critical tool in fighting COVID-19. That's why Conservatives have been pushing for a year to get a stable supply of vaccines early. That's why my wife and I, Rebecca and I, had COVID-19, and we know vaccines are critical, why we videoed our vaccination process. We must work together to fight COVID-19. And I support enhanced measures such as masking, showing a negative test, and rapid testing for those who are unvaccinated. Those are reasonable precautions that we can all use to fight together against COVID-19. Mr. Trudeau is launching an election in the fourth wave of a pandemic, not securing the health and economic well-being of Canadians after he let the Delta variant into this country. This is a time for us to work together for the well-being of all Canadians.
Merci pour la réponse, mais par rapport à la vaccination obligatoire des fonctionnaires fédéraux, quelle est votre position là-dessus?
Comme j'ai dit, les vaccins sont efficaces et sécuritaires. J'encourage tous les Québécois, tous les Canadiens de se faire vacciner. C'est un outil important avec les autres, comme les masques, les tests de dépistage rapides. Et les conservateurs soutiennent que les Canadiens puissent faire leurs propres décisions. On doit éduquer et pas forcer. Et on doit travailler ensemble contre la quatrième vague de la COVID-19. Et c'est pourquoi on a un plan, le quatrième pilier de notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada, plus d'autosuffisance en vaccins pour l'équipement médical. On doit être plus prêt dans le futur pour les pandémies.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. Hannah Thibodeau from CBC National News. Hope you're doing well. I want to ask you more on vaccines, please. When it comes to mandatory vaccines, Mr. Trudeau says it should be mandatory for federal workers, for people who are on planes or trains. You have said, get your vaccine, but you don't believe in mandatory vaccines. He says this will be a part of the decision that Canadians will make on which party believes in this. But also I want to ask you, sir, do you believe in a vaccine passport for people who have been vaccinated to have access to certain events or venues because they have gone out there to get their vaccines?
Thank you, Hannah. As you know, my wife Rebecca and I publicized our vaccination process to show Canadians directly that vaccines are not only safe and effective, they're the critical tool in turning the page in COVID-19. We have to try and encourage and have as many people as vaccinated as possible, and then take reasonable precautions to use other tools to keep all Canadians safe. As I said, using rapid testing, using screening, using masking, all of the tools that Canadians have learned to live with in the last 15 months, we have to use to fight COVID-19. And the federal government should respect and partner with any of the provinces on their approaches to keep Canadians safe as well. Some provinces will use a vaccine passport. Other provinces will use a combination of measures to fight against the spread. I'm very disappointed, honestly, that Mr. Trudeau, calling an election amidst a fourth wave of a pandemic, is trying to confuse and divide people with respect to their healthcare decisions.
En français.
Je vais toujours travailler en étroite collaboration avec les provinces sur la santé et le bien-être des Canadiens, des Québécois. On doit travailler ensemble. Et je vais toujours respecter les décisions au Québec comme un passeport vaccinal, les autres outils d'une nation à l'autre, parce qu'on doit travailler ensemble. Je suis déçu par l'approche de M. Trudeau en pleine d'une quatrième vague de déclencher une élection et diviser les gens sur la question de leur santé. On doit éduquer et pas forcer, et il y a des outils nécessaires pour lutter contre la quatrième vague.
May I just get a clear answer? Do you believe in vaccine passports yourself? And then, just to clarify my first question, and then second, will all of your candidates be vaccinated?
As I've said, and it's critical for Canadians to hear this, vaccines are safe and effective for use, and I encourage all Canadians to get vaccinated and to ask questions if they have any questions about the process. That's why I've been very public. My wife and I got vaccines and did it on video, because we all have to work together. We also have to work to use the other tools that are there as well, and there can be reasonable accommodations using masking, using rapid testing, using screening, to make sure we keep people safe. It's time for us to work together, and I can assure you, the Conservative Party, all of our team members, all of our candidates will be working hard to try and work with public health leaders to follow health advice and to keep Canadians safe amidst an election being called for no reason other than political gain by Mr. Trudeau. He knows there's a fourth wave. He has all of the briefings. He has more information than all Canadians. And I sincerely hope Justin Trudeau is not putting people at risk by launching this election.
Next question.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. Mr. O'Toole, I'd like to ask you about the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory video on Twitter. I'm wondering how much of a setback it is for you to have a number of caucus members criticize a party video on the eve of an election, and if unity is something you'll have to be working on in this campaign.
Conservatives are united. We don't think we should be having an election in a fourth wave, but we do see the division caused by Mr. Trudeau, the flight of jobs and investment in our country. Our country's never been so divided, and we're going to present a serious plan. Canada's recovery plan, our 5-pillar plan to kickstart an economic recovery. Our team is united about getting Canada back to work and making sure we're never again unprepared for a crisis as we have been over the last 15 months.
I'd also like to ask you, now that you have been a Conservative leader for a year, and you talked about getting Canadians to know you better, and there are still Canadians who don't know you very well, I'm wondering what you're going to do to change that in what's going to be a tight time frame in this campaign.
Well, I've been the COVID leader in a year, but I'm really proud of our team, and I'm really proud of our efforts to connect with Canadians on Zoom and through all means, and we'll be doing that later today. I'll be talking to thousands of Canadians later today, as I have as Leader of the Opposition. Canada needs a plan. It's been a tough year for everyone, including my family, all Canadian families. Our 5-point Canada's Recovery Plan will address everything from jobs to accountability, trust in government, issues under Mr. Trudeau's cycle of scandals, national mental health leadership, an issue that's been important to me since I left the military, making sure we're ready and making sure we get our finances under control. I know that Canadians are worried about the future, and as they get to know me, I bring people together, I deliver, and we have a plan to secure the future.
Prochaine question.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. J'aimerais revenir sur la question de ma collègue de CBC. Est-ce que tous vos candidats sont vaccinés, M. O'Toole?
Tous nos candidats et candidates vont travailler très fort sur le terrain et vont suivre les règles sanitaires. Comme j'ai dit, les vaccins sont très importants, un outil primordial dans la lutte contre la COVID-19. Et pour notre équipe, on va travailler plus fort de respecter toutes les mesures sanitaires d'une nation à l'autre.
OK, ça ne répond pas vraiment à ma question, mais je vais enchaîner sur un autre sujet. Le défilé de la fierté à Montréal aujourd'hui, il y a des chefs qui y sont présents. Quand vous êtes devenu, vous, chef du Parti conservateur, vous aviez dit que vous alliez participer à ce genre d'événement. Quel message est-ce que vous pensez que ça envoie, le fait que vous n'y soyez pas aujourd'hui?
Je suis en train de préparer pour une élection, bien sûr, mais j'ai un bilan clair sur les droits, sur la communauté LGBTQ. Je suis un allié et je vais travailler avec la communauté LGBTQ sur leur bien-être, de protéger leurs droits, et je vais participer dans les événements de la fierté dans le futur, bien sûr, parce que comme un député, j'ai déjà participé dans les événements dans ma circonscription.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Mr. O'Toole, I'm a little confused here. You say that Justin Trudeau is putting people at risk by forcing us into an election campaign, and yet you won't require your own candidates, who are going to be directly interfacing with the public, with voters, to be vaccinated. Why not?
Well, Glenn, Mr. Trudeau's made a decision to launch an election in the fourth wave of the pandemic. There's no reason for this election, and in fact, we've asked him not to. But as Canadians have seen over 6 years, Mr. Trudeau will always put his own self-interest, interest of insiders, ahead of the national interest. And he's doing that again. I hope there's no risk. I'm disappointed in his decision. Our team, from myself right through to all of our candidates, will follow public health guidance and make sure we're part of the fight against the fourth wave. It has been a tough 15 months for our country. That's why we have a plan to get our country back to work, Canada's recovery plan. And as we communicate that, Glenn, we're going to be making sure we follow all public health guidance to keep people safe.
You've been traveling the country over past months. You were at the Calgary Stampede, for example. And now, with a very short election campaign starting, you were spending the first part of it, the first day, and possibly all day tomorrow, in a hotel ballroom in Ottawa, nowhere near voters. Does that not look performative, that you're trying to emphasize the idea of virtual campaigning when you haven't been virtually campaigning before? And what's the reason why you're stuck here in the Ottawa bubble and not getting out and meeting people?
What's been great in the last month and a half, Glenn, is I've been finally able, as the opposition leader, to get out there. The Calgary Stampede, the greatest outdoor show on earth, was amazing. I've met people and saw the risks of the fires in British Columbia. I met with folks in the offshore industry in Newfoundland and Labrador who have been under attack, have been completely neglected by Mr. Trudeau. I've met with small business owners in all parts of the country in person, wearing masks, following measures. Today, using some of the innovations we've learned over the last year, I will be speaking to thousands of Canadians directly in Quebec, in British Columbia, and in some other provinces as well. So we're going to have exciting opportunities to get out and see people on the ground, hear about their concerns, talk about Canada's recovery plan. But we also are going to use some of the technology that allows us to connect directly and be accountable to Canadians. On va utiliser tous les outils pour cette élection, incluant la technologie. Et on a eu des tournées sur le terrain extraordinaires d'une nation à l'autre. Hier, j'étais à Lévis avec ma fille Molly pour la candidature de Dominique Vien, une voix forte pour la grande région de la capitale. Et aujourd'hui, on va avoir un téléforum avec des milliers de Québécois et Québécoises. Et on va parler sur notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada dans une manière virtuelle et sur le terrain, dans la région, au Québec et à travers le pays.
Next question.
Ian Bailey, Globe and Mail. Mr. O'Toole, what specifically as Prime Minister would you have done or would you be doing to deal with the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan and the events of today?
Well, these are very sad events today in Afghanistan, and my heart goes out to the thousands of military families across the country who in the last few weeks have really been suffering because We lost people in that country. And for many of our veterans, it's horrible to see the Taliban once again securing control of the country. My heart is also breaking for the women and young girls there. That's why Canada was there, our longest mission. And to think they're going to be subjected to those horrific conditions. So Canada must work with our allies. And we're going to be standing up for dignity and for human rights as a government because Mr. Trudeau has not. And today I'm really thinking about our military families. This is a very difficult time for them. Mes pensées sont avec les familles militaires à travers le pays parce que nos soldats ont participé dans la guerre en Afghanistan pour les droits humains, pour les femmes et les filles là-bas. Et c'est un temps difficile pour nos familles militaires. Et on doit travailler en étroite collaboration avec nos alliés pour aider. Et je vais être là comme Premier ministre pour nos valeurs, et pour nos alliés et pour les droits humains à travers le monde.
As a follow-up, in March, you said the Conservative Party needed to have the courage to change in order to have a more positive result than it's had recently. There was pushback then on climate change. Do you think your party, can you seriously say, has your party changed as you go into this election?
We have the courage to put our country first with a plan to get the country working in all parts of the country and in all sectors of our economy. And our party has put forward some incredible ideas that Canadians will be getting to know more details on in the next few months. We are the only option that want to get people working, want to help the small businesses that have been hardest hit, to restore accountability and trust in not only the Prime Minister's office with 3 personal ethical investigations, the sexual misconduct allegation cover-up in the military for 3 years. People are losing faith. We have a plan to restore that. We have a plan to show leadership on mental health, on preparedness, and get our finances under control. So there's courage in the plan we're presenting. And I invite Canadians. I am a new leader with a new style, and I'm in this for you and your families. And my entire adult life, I've served Canada, and now I'm asking for your trust to secure our future.
This will be the last question. Ce sera la dernière question.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. Chris Reynolds, Canadian Press. I haven't heard you speak directly to several questions around vaccination and your own Conservative candidates. I'm wondering, again, will you be requiring candidates in the Conservative Party to be vaccinated, or will you even be asking them to get vaccinated?
Chris, as I've said, vaccines are a critical tool. They're safe and effective, and Conservatives, for the last year, as you know, have been demanding vaccine supply and access and encouraging Canadians to get vaccinated. I think we can also have an approach that uses a whole suite of health measures, from rapid testing and screening, mask usage, to have reasonable accommodations for people that may not be vaccinated, whether young children or other people. We have to use all of the tools and not divide Canadians. Let's work together to fight the 4th wave. I don't think we should be having an election in a 4th wave, but public officials should be talking about all of the measures we've learned in the last few years. All families have a collection of masks at home. Let's use them. Let's use all of our tools. Let's talk about vaccines, rapid tests, distancing, mask usage to fight COVID-19 together.
This morning, Justin Trudeau said that Canadians have a right to weigh in, a right to have their voices heard and vote in an election. Should the Prime Minister resign if he is reduced, or, sorry, if he stays at a minority government status?
Canadians deserve the right to have a government that will be ready for a crisis. Canadians deserve to have the right for a government that puts their interests ahead of the interests of lobbyists and insiders and friends of Mr. Trudeau and his family. Canadians have a right to a plan and to a team that will deliver what we're promising Canadians. So I'm going to be presenting Canada's recovery plan. I have a track record of bringing people together from my time in the military, my time in the private sector as a volunteer. I'm in this for my children and your children. And so Canadians have a right to see the options. There may be 5 parties, but there's only 2 choices: Canada's Conservatives or more of the same from the Liberals and the other parties.
This will be all for today. Merci.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.